You're listening to ayahuascapodcast.com.
Shadow is anything that got split off, put in the closet as a way to survive. So an example would be, let's say I'm a little girl and I get really angry and I punch something and my parent, maybe slaps me and somebody says, little girls don't get angry. And so, I have to take my anger and I put it into the shadows. That's how a shadow can be born. But there's also the golden shadow. So for instance, say I'm a little girl and I'm just, skipping around and laughing really loudly and I get scolded. Don't be so loud. You're bothering us. Oh, so my joy is too much. So I have to put that in the shadow. So anything that gets split off and shoved into the corners becomes our shadow.
Hi guys, and welcome to Ayahuasca Podcast. As always, with you, the host, Sam Belia. Today I'm having a conversation with Robin Kurland. Robin is a licensed marriage and family therapist and psychedelic integration therapist with nearly 20 years of experience. Based in Sacramento, she specializes in trauma, addictions, and integration for survivors of sexual abuse, childhood neglect, and veterans. With background as a dancer and artist, she emphasizes embodiment and creative expression in healing. In this episode, we talk about being recruited by plant medicines, integration and expressive arts, therapy, integrating difficult ayahuasca experiences, integration by dance and movement. Is it okay to dance during the ceremony? Psychedelics for overcoming addiction. Self-governing nature of ayahuasca, internal family systems, pre-integration, post-integration, and more. Enjoy this episode. This episode is sponsored by La Huayra Ayahuasca Retreat. At La Huayra, we combine affordability, accessibility, and authenticity. La Huayra, connect, heal, grow. Guys, I'm looking forward to hosting you. Robin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks so much for having me.
Robin, tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to work with psychedelics.
Ooh, so let's see. A little bit about myself beyond what you shared. I used to be an artist. I used to be a dancer, and I had a traumatic experience that sort of shook my world. I was in a partnership with someone that had passed away, and I actually have found him. And when I went into his room, everything was sort of moving in really slow motion. Like the furniture was floating. I saw his spirit leave his body, and that was probably the most spiritual experience around death that I had ever had. And it really shook my world. And I thought, I'm just going to go back to the studio and keep dancing. But it really sort of changed my perspective. So I decided that I wanted to be a therapist on my own. I was using drawing and dance and music to sort of integrate this trauma. And I thought, I really want to share this with other people. And so luckily I found this beautiful program at CIIS where I could get my master's, but also continue with the arts and weave arts and spirituality into my work. And so, that's what I do now. And it's a really great way to honor him. I mean, this is 25 years ago, I had this experience. But yeah, it's a wonderful thing to weave into my practice and into my life every day.
Well, I'm glad that you didn't let this trauma break you and eventually led to good things like now you're helping other people. The transition from a dancer to integration therapist is it's pretty steep. I can imagine. I went from being a marine offshore oil and gas engineer to running an ayahuasca retreat. So I guess we all get recruited in any shape or form. Like, I don't know if you probably notice people that had their lifestyles, and then all of a sudden they ended up doing something else. Have you observed that?
Yeah, I mean, especially with psychedelics, right? I mean, we have these realizations and openings where we say, "Oh my gosh, I'm in the wrong relationship or the wrong country." But I love the word that you used, recruited. I mean, there's something higher happening beyond our control, and it very much felt like a recruitment. Um, it felt like a nice transition, though, because I think therapists are very creative. Artists make good therapists, and therapists are creative, right? Because we know how to be in the mystery and the absurd and the unknown, and we know how to go with the flow and trust in something greater, like whether it be God or the creative process. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very common thread where people they have one lifestyle, and then all of a sudden, the reason I say recruit is because it happens very spontaneously, and then more and more synchronicities start happening, and it becomes obvious that that's what they're supposed to be doing, and that's the work with psychedelics. And I mean, my engineering background helped me like build a medicine house and design cabins and stuff like that. And I'm sure your dancing background led you to now integrating with art and dance. So can you talk to us about that? Uh, to begin with, talk a little bit about integration, even though I know most of my listeners know it, but I want to know your version, and then we'll talk about specific kinds of integration.
Yeah, absolutely. So I heard you ask a couple things, how I weave expressive arts into my integration work and what my thoughts are on integration. So integration is it's a weaving, it's a melding, it's an alchemy. So we're taking, and it doesn't even have to be psychedelic. It could be a trauma or a vacation or something profound that comes up in your meditation. So it's an integration is an opportunity for you to ingest, digest, break down, and have it become a part of the fabric of your being. I know that sounds a little abstract, but I can be a little bit more concrete when we get into the subcategories.
No, it's a great description. Um, so when you work with integration, and I mean at my retreat, so I run an ayahuasca retreats called Loira, and we have those integration journals, and in the journals in the middle there are a few pages with mandalas for coloring. So that's the only thing I know about that is when people color, their mind sort of relaxes, and it gives them ability for more stuff to come up. And then I want them to sit down and journal some more. But that's about it. So I'm really new to the topic. I want to explore it more and offer it to the people that come to my retreat. So please educate us on the integration with arts.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you're doing beautiful work, by the way. Yeah, I appreciate all that you do. And what a beautiful place you have. I'll have to come and see you sometime. So, yeah, the coloring and the journaling, those are two very important things. But if we were to look at, the integration of difficult experiences, is that an okay place to go? So, um, I mean, first you probably see this all the time. So, into a difficult experience could be anything from, like I said earlier, like, oh my God, I'm in the wrong relationship or I'm in the wrong career. But then we have more difficult experiences where people remember past traumas, whether it be a sexual trauma or, just I thought I had a perfect childhood, and now I see my father and my mother in a different light. And all of these are considered difficult experiences because it's almost like a new trauma, though your body has been carrying it the whole time. um, Psychedelics is saying, well, you summoned me, and so here it is. Here you go. So those are a little bit more heavy. And so for people who have had difficult experiences, I would say the number one thing is to really get into a relationship with either a coach or a therapist. Um, Psychedelics teach us that we're all connected. They teach us the importance of community. And so why would you shortchange yourself in that way? Treat yourself. You deserve it. You deserve to have that opportunity to really get into the nuances of your own experience. I think group settings can be really good, but if it's something like a repressed memory of a trauma or suppressed memory of a trauma, I think it's really important to have your own one-on-one experience. Um, from there, I would say integration long term is probably, or most definitely, really important. Long term integration, sometimes people think, I'm just going to journal about it for a couple days. I'm going to do some drawing. I'm going to walk in nature. And those things are absolutely important. But the long term integration gives this new material that's come to the surface an opportunity to integrate into your psyche. And, your protectors, your inner protectors, your managers, your firefighters, they have worked so hard to keep whatever was suppressed in a locked box. And now psychedelics is, knocking things around and saying, here you go. And so your protectors are probably not going to like the idea of you staying present with this thing and integrating this thing. They're going to work really hard to say, well, let's put it back underground and put some dirt on it. So our job is truly to keep it alive, keep in dialogue with it. And that could be through dance. Sometimes I have my clients, if they're having a hard time accessing a part like their inner teenager or a protector, I might actually have them stand up and embody it because they can't, we can't always access it from the place where the problems are born, right? So stand up. What does your protector look like? Is it a man? Is it a female? Is it an entity? What are they wearing? What do they smell like? What do their voices sound like? And so for them to really get into this part that is of themselves, it really helps with the integration. I also very much encourage dance and sing. I think that any form of dance that allows you to be in relationship with this experience. And so, for instance, let's say somebody has had a sexual trauma that they had forgotten about. That could be absolutely terrifying. I had my own experience with that. If we have time, I can share with you. But yeah, it's dancing is such a spiritual practice, right? It's primal. And for people who have been abused, we tend to be cut off from our bodies. And so anything that allows us to be in the body and, it could be a small dance, it could be a big dance. It could be to gentle music, it could be to heavy metal, whatever allows you to feel like you are really starting to build a relationship with those parts.
Okay, so thank you for that description, but I think we talked about everything except for the art.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is I do expressive arts, which is a little bit different than art therapy, right? So art therapy is visual, or expressive arts is dance, music, psychodrama, poetry, voice. So any form of expression. So
So that's my bad, because when I thought art, I thought that's gonna be something about drawing. So that's forgive my ignorance. But
no, you're fine. Drawing, absolutely, we do that too. I think, the mandala, I love the container so people can really fill that space in and it feels really good, especially right after ceremony. Um, Integration long term, I really encourage people to be messy. I've had clients who are so afraid to just put color on a piece of paper. And so I'll get on the floor with them and sit with them and color with them and draw with them and encourage them to just be messy. Perfectionism is a symptom of trauma. when we're frozen in our bodies and we're so afraid to be creative and show our true selves, that's a symptom of trauma. So, just I have crepes and I have chalks, and so I encourage my clients to choose art materials that are a little bit messy versus the more contained materials like markers or pencils.
Well, I can tell you my kids are not traumatized because they're very, very messy. But let's pretend that somebody was listening to this, had a ceremony yesterday, and they want to integrate with art. They get themselves some crayons or some other messy visual arts aids. So what do they do? What do they draw? How can one direct that experience so it's productive?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I might invite them to start with the feeling. What is it that you're feeling in your body? And if that expression were to spill over onto the paper, what would that look like? And so I may spend a little bit of time doing some somatic experiencing. Another option too would be, what did you see? What did you see in your ceremony? Um, how would you describe it? And just let's go ahead and drop down into our bodies and hold that image in your mind. And then they could even extend their arm with their eyes closed and just begin to let the arms and the hands do the magic, right? So with eyes closed, you're not thinking about how it looks and trying to match what you experienced in your psychedelic experience. It's just letting it flow. So those are two options. Another option would be to do it standing up if you have the ability to maybe hang the paper on the wall. That way they're moving their body and maybe even making some sounds, like really letting it come through. Um, so it's a full experience.
So what I just realized is we've been punishing graffiti artists wrongly all along. They were just traumatized, and we're trying because that's how it looks like the graffiti. Um, yeah, I had another question, and I kind of distracted myself with the graffiti part. But let me ask you the same question, but this time about the expressive arts, as in dancing. So same thing, a person they just had an ayahuasca retreat yesterday, and now they want to integrate their experience with dancing. What should they do?
Oh, so um the first thing I would do, so if they're able to, you can even do this. You don't have to be an expressive arts therapist. You don't have to be a dancer, but just to be with the client and mirror them and invite them again, just starting with the body, drop down into your body. What are you feeling? If that feeling could make a sound, what would it sound like? If that sound were to create a shape, what would that shape be? And just begin from the shape. And then from the shape, you can begin to move the shape, and then, of course, inviting them to bring music. Music is very inspirational. But again, starting with the body, starting with the feeling, creating the sound, creating a shape, and then from there, letting that flow. And sometimes people are really intimidated by the thought of dancing and expressing themselves. There's a lot of shame and embarrassment in our culture around moving our bodies freely. And so it can be really powerful to do it with them and just mirror them. So you're just kind of following their lead, like they're looking in a mirror. Um, and it's also important to say, it doesn't have to be a full on dance. You can just dance 5 minutes a day, you know? Um, it could be, if you feel safer, you can go off into the woods and dance in the woods, dance with the trees, mimic what you're seeing in nature and let that teach you what the dance is. So there's different ways you can incorporate that expression.
Yeah, I've not much of a dancer, but in the ceremony sometimes I feel the urge to dance, and only in the ceremony, to be honest. Um, What do you think about dancing during a psychedelic experience?
Oh, I think it's wonderful. Do you see that a lot?
Yeah, so the way our Maloko or medicine house is structured, it's pretty big. Uh, and we have a stage, a pretty big stage where there's also music, medicine music. Colombian ayahuasca tradition is very musical. And then there's a kind of space in between, pretty large space, and then there's the mattresses where people are lying down. So in that space in between the stage and where the mattresses are, we allow people to dance, except for we ask them not to clap or not to make any sounds, just dance. That we allow that. And a lot of people dance, some more than others. Some ceremonies, there's just more sort of joy coming up. But yeah, so I wanted to know your opinion, whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing or anything in between.
Yeah, moving the body is never a bad thing. I want to challenge you to dance more. It sounds like it's in you, and you have that craving. But you know what's funny? I have never danced during a psychedelic experience. Um, I'm so much of a like cocoon, talking to spirit. I'm a big crier, lots of crying, lots of grief usually comes up. So I'm usually like, I've got my hat on and my blankets and my animals around me. But as an integration practice, I do dance, lots of singing too. I'm not a very good singer at all, by the way, but just opening that up and letting that sound out again is so primal and feels really good.
I can't believe I'm saying it because I'm not a dancer, but you should dance more in the ceremony, Robin.
I will. I will. I absolutely will. Challenge accepted.
Yeah, I danced salsa for a few years, but obviously it's much more structured. But I do enjoy singing. Let's go back to the arts topic because I remembered my question. So I don't do much art. Generally, my 4-year-old draws better than I do. But after my very first ayahuasca experience, when I was seeing, my hands were laying by my sides on the dirt floor, and I was seeing that my hands started to like twist and they would grow into the ground as roots. And I then made a drawing of this. I still have it, and that's the only time I drew after ceremony. So that's why I'm saying I'm really a newbie in that. So my question to you is, with drawing, is the merit of drawing only the expressive part, as in like putting things on paper, or is there is also part to it which is interpretation of what has been drawn and like trying to find some nuggets in it?
Ooh, what a great question. Yes, 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 yes is the answer. Yeah. So another reason to make sure that you're in relationship with someone, I think it's possible for you to look at what you've drawn and see if anything else pops out, but having someone else in the room to say, "What's this little dark corner over here? What does this part want to say?" I'm really curious about your colors. Tell me more about this color palette that you've chosen. Um, yeah, I think interpretation is a really exciting part of not only psychedelic integration, but just art and expressive arts therapy in general. It's right. We're letting the unconscious and subconscious come forward in this very abstract way, and it's there to teach us things. So, yeah, having an opportunity to it's just like dream interpretation.
Is there any maybe way to analyze things? Like, for example, if you have many sharp, jagged lines in your paintings, it means such and such. If it has describe such and such object, is there like like you have those dream almanacs where you can like, is there a thing like this for art?
I mean, there might be, but my my training and just my way of being, I think it's best not to put interpretations. Everything is different for everyone, right? I might look at a client and they have all these black jagged lines, and I might think, oh, this person's in pain. And then I say, tell me about these black jagged lines. And then they say, this is my power. I feel it in my core, and this is what helps me get through the day. So we have to be careful that we're not doing any kind of like cookie cutter interpretations, just to really leave it open, because that's where the mystery door is open. We just want to follow, in expressive arts, we always say that the art is like the third. So there's me, there's my client, and then there's this other thing, which is the art. And then you add psychedelics in, and then you add in, this person's spirit guides and their ancestors. So it's the ultimate collaboration. So I try to stay open to whatever is in the room.
Yeah, I agree with that because for a while I was teaching people on how to smoke the tobacco ceremonially and how to interpret things that you see or feel. And they always ask me like, oh, what does this mean? Or my tobacco is burning black. What does that mean? And even though there are specific instructions that I guess some shamans told me, I told them that, you always have to ask what it means to you, because your psyche communicates to you through the language only you can understand. It's kind of like, I speak Latvian or Russian, and if you cannot translate what I say through English. So, and I guess there are similarities with that expressive language, and of course there are some patterns, but I guess we can't really mash them all together.
Yeah, that's a beautiful example. I love what you said. There's a special language, and it sounds like you're already doing that with these people that are coming to see you, which is wonderful.
Okay, so if we can, I'd like to go back to the topic of integrating difficult experiences. So we host on average 70 people a month at our retreat, and there's most of the time we do it in a very careful way, and we do have some integration containers as well. But occasionally there are people that are maybe more sensitive, or their trauma is bigger, and they require a very specific post ceremony integration. We do have some coaches we work with as well. I'll be more than glad to add you to that list as well. But the situation is that some people, they have a very strong experience, and they experience more of a reactivations, and maybe they feel a little bit disconnected. So what of course the best thing for them to do is to talk to an integration coach and integrate. But let's get a hypothetical situation where they can't afford it, or they have no internet, or for some reason they cannot book a session with you and integrate with you. What do you think is the best way for those people to integrate, like those really difficult experiences where they are, let's say re-traumatized, or a really big trauma came by, and they are facing that?
Wow. So what I'm hearing you say is, if you have a client who has a big trauma come up and they don't have the funds or the accessibility, physical accessibility to an integration coach, is that right? So, boy, that's a tricky one. I would say to encourage them to find at least one safe person in their life, because when those traumas come up, it is it beco even though like I said earlier, even though the body has been carrying it for years, to see it and feel it and have it be real for the first time is like having a very brand new trauma. And so just like with any trauma, you're assessing for suicidality. That's a big one that I see with my clients that have suppressed or repressed memories come up. So safety would be the number one important thing. So if they could, even if there's like a friend in a nearby village or a nearby town, making sure that they're not isolating would be so, so crucial, because it can become very scary, very overwhelming. The brain is trying to figure out, like, wait a minute, I've been working so hard to keep this locked in your body all of these years, and now it's like everywhere. And it's, people start having nightmares, they start having flashbacks, all of the symptoms that come with PTSD. So, finding a safe person, making sure that person is not isolating or alone. If there's any sort of like nearby activities, like any kind of group activity that they can continue to show up for. Yeah, those are probably the biggest ones: community and staying connected.
So when someone goes through an experience that is so difficult and stuff came up and maybe they are a little re-traumatized, is it safe to say, or is it acceptable to tell them that it's for the better? Like I know it can be difficult at the moment. You're going through those experiences, but the reality is that repressed trauma is coming up, and if you do it right, you will feel better afterwards, better than ever before.
Absolutely. And that is the truth. Yes, absolutely. Um, yeah, and it's so true. You've probably seen that many times. I had a repressed memory of abuse come up during a psychedelic experience with a coach. He was present, and it was absolutely terrifying. But my intention was so simple for this session. My intention was simply, I want to be able to feel love. The people around me that love me, I can't feel it. Something is blocked inside of me after all this work, all these years. And then here it was, this, 6 years ago. And so, and it's, I mean, my life is completely different. I'm the most free, the most joyful I've ever been. But man, was it dark. It was not an easy road to get here, but that was a long answer to your question.
The longer, the better. So it's almost like a be careful what you wish for situation with psychedelics, because when people, so many times, and every time we have a new group, I talk to people and I always tell them, you got to do the work, you got to do the work. And that's the work, 20 years of therapy, 15 years of therapy comes with 15 years of therapy emotions in a week. And of course, it's not entirely true because that simplifications of counting ayahuasca or psychedelic experiences with years of therapy is not really precise. But let's talk a little bit about your own experience. So you have battled with some addiction. I know your favorite psychedelics are mushrooms and ketamine, and obviously you had this trauma resurface. Talk to us about your experience, how it began, maybe how your trauma was formed, your PTSD, and your journey of recovery. Feel free to, this one can be a very long answer. We have time.
Okay. And before I forget, I want to circle back to the scenario that you presented me with, where if you have somebody who is unable to, who has no access to integration therapy, one thing I forgot to mention is to encourage this person to go slowly, because you probably see this a lot. When people come out of psychedelic experiences, they're like, oh my God, I have to change everything all at once. So we have to, right? Psychedelics just blast through the psyche, floods us with the 15 years of therapy. So slowing it down, and even some like gentle exercises like mindful walking meditation in the woods can be a really beautiful way to integrate. Journaling might be a little bit scary because you don't want to keep re-traumatizing yourself, but anything that gets them to slow down and just sort of mimic nature. So, sorry, I wanted to make sure because that's a really great question. So with my own experience, boy, oh boy, where should I start? Yeah, I do have a history of addiction. I moved to San Francisco to start a dance company after being in a dance company and dancing for many years in Philadelphia. And I became very addicted very quickly. And, all this time, no idea that I'm carrying this trauma in my body. I had some sense, just because I even on drugs, I think I had a good relationship with my body. I knew I was carrying something, right? So, the extremes of reaching for something outside of myself to numb out, I knew something was there, but I just had nothing to point to. So, fast forward, of course, I get help, I get clean, I get sober, which I still am, by the way. And during the journey, it eventually led me to 12-step programs. And I know a lot of people have some negative experiences or some thoughts about 12-step programs, but the 12 steps themselves are actually really, really spiritual. I mean, there's honesty, integrity, perseverance, being of service, willingness, faith, courage, all of these things are addressed in the 12 steps. And so I had just finished doing a round of the 12 steps, and it felt like the most powerful pre-integration for a psychedelic experience. And I had experimented with psychedelics in college. I went to college for the arts. And so, we didn't have sports teams and campuses. It was like the streets of Philadelphia were our campus, and we would have these big warehouse parties. And there was always, LSD and mushrooms. So I had dabbled, but I'd never had a meaningful experience. So after I had worked the 12 steps this round, I knew I was ready to go deeper and have this experience. And so my first meaningful experience was with mushrooms, and it cracked me open in the most beautiful way. There were things that were, I almost picture it like dust that settles in the corner. If you walk into an old room that you haven't been in a long time, the windows are boarded up and there's cobwebs everywhere. So even though I was happy, I was thriving, the mushrooms just kind of came in and opened up the curtains and cleaned up all the dust. And I just felt the most incredible, deepest, deepest love for myself. And I wept because I realized in that moment, I don't think I've actually ever truly loved myself before. And I'm so in love with myself now. And I know you're probably very familiar with this feeling. And so this cracking open and this cleaning up and this letting the light in has just completely changed my life. I mean, it changed the way I am as with my partner and my business. And so the thought of poisoning my body just does not even occur to me. And I think that's why I love working with psychedelics and trauma and addiction. I see people stuck in relapse. They're chronic relapsers. They can't stay sober. And the talk therapy and the 12-step groups, I don't believe is enough. I think we have to go deeper and go to the root and go to the wound and heal the wound. Because if you love yourself, I know that sounds so simple because learning to love ourselves is quite a journey. But I do believe that there's a link between psychedelics and long-term sobriety.
Yeah, obviously, for those who don't know, 12 steps is a part of the AA program, Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've interviewed few people on the topics. And what you're saying is something is missing. I like the joke that AA is missing one more A, which is ayahuasca, and I think that could be very complete experience because I would assume if you do ayahuasca and then you do 12 steps, that could be a very powerful integration for your psychedelic experience. And people don't know that the founder of AA was actually offering them to do LSD, and they didn't because they thought that, well, it's just another substance, right? But I think eventually they'll get to it. So just to throw it out there.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I've also seen clients who begin to abuse psychedelics. And so it's not for everyone, and it's a tricky dance. I think I know many wonderful, beautiful people who have never done psychedelics and have great lives in long-term sobriety just through 12-step in therapy. So
Definitely, everything is possible, and I like to say that psychedelics is just a catalyst, or it just makes everything more powerful and more quick. But I'm definitely convinced that it's one of the many ways to do it. And regarding abusing psychedelics, I think definitely it is a possibility. I've met people that had hundreds of ayahuasca ceremonies, but they're still the same. But it's really rare, at least with ayahuasca. Like, I mean, you can abuse ketamine really easily because it's just very pleasant. But with ayahuasca, it's just the process is so hard. It's kind of hard to abuse because of how unpleasant it is. Not most of the time, but a lot of the time. And then also, what ayahuasca does sometimes, it's sort of self-governing in a way that if you come too often or too soon, or you haven't done the homework, the medicine itself will be like, it happened to me once. I was going too fast, too quickly, and I just wanted everything straight away. And I was like, "Oh, why are you back so soon? You didn't do the homework," and it gave me a terrible trip. It's like I can discipline you instead too. So try to abuse that. It's not as pleasant.
it's it's not as pleasant for sure. I appreciate you saying that.
The top love.
And oh, go ahead.
Yeah, tell me.
I was just gonna say, I mean, that reminds me of the shadow work of all of this. There's a shadow side to working with psychedelics, and there's a shadow side to integration, which is again why I know I keep repeating myself. We just don't want to do it alone.
Yeah. Talk to us about shadow work. What do you know?
I love talking about shadow work. I wouldn't say I'm a shadow expert. I mean, there's some people who are Jungian psychologists who have specifically studied shadow work in the technical sense, but the best way to describe shadow work for people who are listening that maybe don't know, shadow is anything that got split off and put in the closet as a way to survive. So an example would be, let's say I'm a little girl and I get really angry and I punch something, and my parent, maybe slaps me. This is hypothetical. This didn't happen. My parents didn't slap me, and so I get slapped, and somebody says, little girls, don't get angry. And so, I have to take my anger and I put it into the shadows. That's how a shadow can be born. But there's also the golden shadow. So for instance, say I'm a little girl and I'm just, skipping around and laughing really loudly, and I get scolded. Don't be so loud. You're bothering us. Oh, so my joy is too much. So I have to put that in the shadow. So anything that gets split off and shoved into the corners, becomes our shadow. And so I see that a lot of times people with anger, men and women both, terrified of their anger, but then it ends up coming out anyway because it's inevitable. It's a part of being human. And anger is a beautiful emotion. It elevates us, it energizes us, it directs us. But because of that experience, it gets shoved into the closet. And so with psychedelics and psychedelic integration, I love watching people build relationships with their silliness again or their anger again, and to have a fuller experience as a human, reminding people it's okay to be loud, it's okay to be angry.
Yeah, I love the topic of shadow work. I've even used to give little workshops on it to the people at the retreat. Uh, some people call ayahuasca shadow medicine because it reveals your shadow. And it ties nicely to our topic about very difficult processes and integration. Um, Recently, I had an experience with one veteran who has, through ayahuasca, discovered this shadow. And it's basically this sort of part of him that is repressed, the angry part, the aggressive part. And he, when you shared that with me, obviously I'm not a therapist. I have very limited understanding. I told him to try and see if you can accept that part, and so like give it some love, and you know, try and like tell it, thank it for what it did. It was necessary to protect you for whatever reason it was repressed. So that kind of brings me into like, what would you think is the best course of action for a person like this? Because it is a terrifying experience to see that there's different parts of you. And also, I know you mentioned a few times some terminology from internal family systems. So maybe you can tie that answer to that modality.
Absolutely. Yeah, what a great question. And for sure I will. So um, the way that I work, I blend like 5 different modalities at any given time. I call it the dance of Hamesh, which is the Hebrew number 5. And the number 5 translates to freedom, curious, and change. So when you are working with a shadow, it's I think sorry, let me slow down. The best part is to start with what they're feeling in their body. And then if they could name what that part is, what is that part? Okay, well, it's my angry part. And so we don't even have to get technical right away. So in IFS, we have, the manager, the firefighter, the exiled parts. We want to kind of color outside the lines a little bit. Like maybe somebody says, this is my inner dragon, or this is my inner child. Maybe they're not sure. And so this is where maybe expressive arts can come in handy. Let's stand up and show me what this part looks like. And then they can stand up and say, this part is angry and it wants to make, fists and grind their teeth. And by embodying that part, it allows them to get in touch with it more so it's not so scary. Because when it's outside of ourselves, it's like this monster that really has control and is driving the bus. But to dialogue with it and then, like I said, take it one step further and do the drama therapy, you get to embody, which sort of softens it a little bit. And through that softening, there can be integration. So,
But basically, uh, my recommendation was somewhat correct, right? Regarding not repressing, but embodying and or accepting the parts of ourselves.
absolutely. Absolutely. And there's all of these beautiful ways to accept, you can journal to this part, you can embody the part, you can dance with this part on the dance floor, or even just talking about it. Something as simple as just, putting a hand on your heart and a hand on your belly with your eyes closed with a mantra, I love my anger, I accept this part. be with me today.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Um, let's go back and talk a little bit about expressive therapy. What is ecstatic dance?
I have to say I really don't know much about ecstatic dance. I'm more of a five rhythms girl, but ecstatic dance, what I do know is that, and I've been before, um, it's a way to get in touch with your primal self, which I believe any form of dance can do that for us. But ecstatic dance is dancing with other people, feeding off of each other's energy, and just letting yourself be and letting yourself loose.
Yeah, I've tried it once and I didn't like it at all. Felt very uncomfortable. How does one embrace, dancing very funnily, and what do you do if you're like you just can't? You're like, this is just not me.
You might be more of like I am, a more of a five rhythms person. So five rhythms, and I don't have them memorized, but it's sort of like a softer, gentler circle. And this is something that I do on Sunday mornings when I can. So the DJ is also like a therapist, and there's a wider variety of music versus just this one type of music that they do at ecstatic dance. Um, ecstatic dance is like the new kids of Burning Man, and five rhythms is like we're the oldies from Burning Man. Different flavor.
Gotcha. Last question, Robin. What is pre-integration? How it's done, and why is it important?
Ooh, that's a big one. Yeah, let's see. How much time do we have? Just a couple minutes. So, pre-integration is like cleaning your house before you have company. You're inviting a powerful medicine into your psyche and into your body. And so you want to do some work to prepare. So the medicine doesn't have to work so hard to get through all of the obstacles. So I I typically only have psychedelic experiences with my clients who have been working with me long term. I have done short term pre integration before, and it feels a little bit rushed and a little bit choppy because I do tend to work people with primarily with PTSD, and so in pre integration, really starting to give voice to what we want to work on, what are our traumas, what are our intentions, and also taking a look at what are we already doing? What does your community look like? Are you moving your body? What kind of foods are you eating? How's your sleep? Are you isolated? How much sunshine do you get? So there's an assessment of the whole person. It's this holistic view into examining, who I am or who your client is. And then from there, we start to maybe connect some dots, like bring in a little IFS. Tell me about your protectors. Tell me about your managers. Tell me about your inner teenager and your inner child. And the other thing that I would maybe introduce in pre-integrate that, well, I definitely introduce, but if you have limited time, is to anything that's somatic. What's your relationship to your body? How are you feeling right now as we're having this conversation? And I think that would be a really nice way to prepare someone for a psychedelic journey if time is limited. But like I said, with the long-term pre-integration that I do, I'm kind of pulling in all of my 5 modalities and breaking things apart. But it makes space to let the medicine in and do its work.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you for this answers and all this answer and all the previous ones. I think it was a really interesting episode. So before we wrap up, please tell our listeners where they can find you and if they want to do integration with you, how they can find you.
Yeah, this was so fun. Thank you. So robinkurland.com is probably the best and the easiest, but you could also find me on Psychology Today, Psychedelic Support. And I do have an Instagram page that I'm not on there very often, and it's psychedelic recovery _. But robinkurland.com is probably the easiest.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us. I've learned a lot, and yeah, you're always welcome at Loara whenever you choose to come.
I would love that. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you, guys, and you were listening to Ayahuasca Podcast. As always, with you, host Sam Believ, and I will see you in the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to support us and psychedelic renaissance at large, please follow us and leave us a like wherever it is you're listening. Share this episode with someone who will benefit from this information. Nothing in this podcast is intended as medical advice, and it is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This episode is sponsored by Loara Ayahuasca Retreat. At Loara, we combine affordability, accessibility, and authenticity. Loara, connect, heal, grow. Guys, I'm looking forward to hosting you. Sponsor.